Hey, it's adding. It's adding. So we'll see. Oh, there she is.
Hey,
Good afternoon, Miss Branch. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good. Good, good,
I've been
good.
better.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's good. I actually had to change because my internet at home, something happened to it. So I had to
Oh
run here to my
no.
sister's house. Yeah, but it's okay. My sister opened up her doors for me, and so I am here at her home right now. And I'm ready to I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, let me just get centered here. I feel like
Okay,
a
get
little off.
centered. And while you're getting centered, I'm going to ask
There
people,
we go.
send me the thumbs up if you can hear us just fine. My sister's in the background. She's got her nice t-shirt going on.
Oh, I have my nice orchids. I grow orchids. That's my thing. Um, I
She just has to show the t-shirt. Yeah, we can see your
oh
face.
nice. Hi.
She was trying to hide. Those are my t-shirts from actually 4 years
Oh
ago.
wow.
Yeah. This year's
Vintage.
a little bit different.
Future
Yeah,
collector's
yeah, she
items. You could have a raffle. Hey,
it
there's a
is. It
fundraiser.
is.
Vintage.
Collector's item.
Yeah.
I could sign it and there you go. There you have it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
We have people from Phoenix who are listening in. I do have Zhao Marie who's listening in from Los Angeles. So we have a lot of people who are listening in. We also have a shout out from Salt Lake City, Kayenta, Huron, Shiprock, Dorothy Adson. Thank you for sending me the thumbs up. Etta Brown. So we do have a lot of people who are currently right now. We have 143 people who are listening in right now, who are excited just as much as I am to hear what you have to say. So I did send you kind of a rough draft of what to expect. I guess maybe it's kind of like an agenda
Yeah.
on what to expect for today. So those of you who are listening, I'm going to go through very quickly on what to expect. So we do have just kind of an introduction, which we're starting right now. It's going to be about 10 minutes so that we can make sure the sound is correct, that we're centered. And then also, that we go through what the rules of Let's Talk Politics are. So number one, that's really the introduction is 10 minutes of intro. Then we have, I will be turning the floor over to you, Ms. Branch. I'll give you 20 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, tell us about yourself, and most importantly, tell us what your platform is. And I'll give you 20 minutes to do that. In the meantime, I'm going to be looking at comments of people who have questions that they might want to ask you, because we're going to have a part of this inquiry with people asking questions. After you're done with your introduction and your platform, we're going to go ahead and move on to 3 Navajo Nation policy questions. And these are 3 questions that have been already generated. These questions are going to range from generating revenue, your thoughts on that, hemp, helium, LGBTQI, veterans, talking specifically about the trust fund, and then also housing, the Washington, D.C. House, public safety, scholarships, ARPA, the chapter house issues, grants, both from the federal and the state level, small businesses, education, land reform, broadband, and just simple services that are being requested from our Navajo people, where many of our Navajo people hear there's no money. So that's just, so we're going to pull 3 questions from any one of those topics. And I do have the 3 questions already pulled right now. What I was hoping to do had we met in person is I would have let you pull those questions yourself. And I do have, I'm so sorry, I do have just kind of a, I'm going to be giving some background information before I throw you out to the wolves. just to kind of give you some insight into what the Navajo Nation, the 24th Navajo Nation Council has been doing, just really what the vote was on some of these issues. Some of them are legislations that are still in the hopper right now, but it would be good to kind of get your insight into that. And then once we're done with that, so 3 questions will be pulled. And it could be any one of those questions, ranging from any of those questions on those topics. Then we'll go ahead and proceed forward to the next part of this talk, which is going to be questions from the public. People who have already sent in questions, or people who are going to be asking questions on this line here. I do have my assistant who's going to be keeping track of the questions. That way she can text me what those questions are, or she can email me. And what we'll do is we'll pull 3 questions from the public who may want to ask you questions. And then at the very end, we're going to have our wrap up, which is going to be really your conclusion, because by that point you have you're already going to have time to talk about your platform. You're going to be in the hot seat for the 3 questions coming out of Navajo Nation Council. Or I'm sorry, the legislations coming out of Navajo Nation Council. You're going to have questions coming from the public, and then the conclusion, the part of the conclusion is to just wrap up, just what we have talked about. So I'm guessing and estimating that this whole thing should take roughly about an hour and a half. We don't want to, give it too much time. Which is why we're going to try to stick to the time frame. I will give you a heads up. I will tell you, I'll put up a 5 to let you know, when you have 5 minutes left. I'll put up a 2 to let you know when we have 2 minutes left, and I'll put up a 1 to let you know when we have 1 minute left. That way, what the time frame is. And the purpose of me doing the time frame, Miss Branch, is that, as you know, one of the things that I often talk about is how, and this too, because I'm sure that you've advocated at the federal and state level. We don't get the all the time in the world to explain where we're at with certain issues. It's like we kind of have to be prepared. We have to go in there, and we don't really know what's going to happen. So sometimes we could get 5 minutes talking to our senators and representatives at the state and federal level, or we could get 2 minutes, and so we just kind of have to hit our high points. So with that, I will ask you, do you have any questions about the procedure?
Yeah, it was a little unclear to me where I talk about my platform. Was that like part of the introduction, or?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll have 20 minutes. Once we're done here, I'll go ahead and start the clock. You'll have 20 minutes to introduce yourself, however way you want to introduce yourself, and you'll have that time frame to put in your platform, and to get people to vote for you, and to tell them where you stand. It's going to be uninterrupted, so this is your time to share your ideas. I will say I have roughly close to 14,000 followers, and on average, we range from 3 to maybe 9,000 views with these videos. So that kind of should give you an idea of all of the people that you'll be reaching out to with your platform.
Okay. I'm trying to share this on my campaign page.
You might have to flip your phone. When there's 2 people, what we're doing right now, it's difficult to to share the screen. So as unprofessional as it is, you might have to flip your phone to show, if you want to show something on your camera. Does that make sense?
Okay. Well, here, I have my my computer here, so let me just move this so I can review the screen. So I was trying to share it from while you were speaking, so I apologize for this little additional
You're
delay.
okay. And that's really the purpose of this 10 minutes, the beginning intro, is to make sure, number one, that we know what's expected, and then also what the agenda is going to be, and then to kind of work out the kinks a little bit in terms of what you want to show.
Great. Oops.
hear you typing away over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, one of the most important things I learned in high school, my sister insisted that I take typing because she was like, someday you may have to be a secretary.
Yeah. Well, that's why I went back to school, was to become a secretary.
Oh, wow.
And here I am, council delegate. Yeah.
Amazing. I know. So those of you out there who have young people in your lives, don't set the bar so low. Tell them they need to take typing classes so they can be a future president or council delegate.
Right. Especially for our girls, you don't tell them, oh, you can go back to school to be a secretary. I mean, come on. Can you imagine? No. You want to tell your young girls, be president of the United States, be president of the Navajo Nation, be a senator, be a representative, be a council delegate. Those things are possible.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm trying to get
needed, very needed. We need some young women on the council. And I'm so excited to see so many young women running. It's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
Delegate Crotty and I, we were just talking about that. This is probably the first time ever, and I'm trying to get verification on this, but I think this is the first time ever that we have had as many women running for delegate.
And president.
Like and president. You're correct. And president.
Which
and
is
president.
Great.
Thank you for correcting me. Yes, you are correct. So we are seeing a number of women coming out, in numbers, wanting to run for office, and that's such an amazing, to just be part of that, to be, to say that, we were here when that happened. We got to witness it. We got to see it. Wow.
And how cool to have those Miss Navajos running. Sometimes I feel like I'm running for Miss Navajo and president at the same time. I'm sure the guys get ready in like 10 minutes. I'm like, I can't even get dressed in 10 minutes.
I always say, heaven forbid, Delegate Crotty, Delegate Charlene or I show up on council floor with a t-shirt and tennis shoes. We would make the front page of the Navajo Times. I am telling you, Ms. Branch, you know what it's like being there in DC. You know what it's like, or being there in Winter Rock. Okay. So here we go. We do have people on the line. They're giving me the thumbs up, saying that they are able to hear us. So before I turn the floor over to you, again, those of you who are watching, those of you who are listening, those of you who are joining us today, we have 222 people on the line right now, ready to listen to what you have to say. Miss Ethel Branch, I am here, ready to start. So just as a recap, so this 10 minutes is really to kind of prepare, get people on the line, and then, make sure that all of our equipment is working fine. Number two is I will be turning the floor over for 20 minutes.
Okay.
20 minutes, Miss Ethel Branch will have to.
Can I just quickly, you see the hook above my head? It's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that down. Give me one second. I'm going to try to.
You're fine.
Like hide the camera.
You're fine. Yeah, it does look like you got like a little hook going on. Maybe you can use that as a slogan and say you're going to hook the people into voting for you. So while Miss Branch is trying to fix that, let me go forward and let me explain it again. Miss Branch will have 20 minutes. It'll be her time. The floor will be given to Miss Branch. During that time, she will do her introduction, her name, her clan, where she comes from, whatever it is that she wants to share about herself, and then she's going to go straight into her platform. And in that time frame, in 20 minutes is what she will have. As soon as Mrs. Branch is over, we're going to go into 3 questions. Ms. Branch has no clue what those 3 questions are, but those 3 questions relate to what is happening on the 24th Navajo Nation Council, whether it includes legislation that has been passed already or legislation that's still in the hopper. And so she will be asking, or she will be asked where she stands on certain issues. And at this point, I am not going to be interrupting her, but we will be having dialect about what's happening with the policies. When that is completed, again, 3 questions, and these questions are going to range from the following topics. They're going to range from her ideas on generating revenue, where she stands on hemp and helium, LGBTQI, ideas on Veterans Trust Fund or Veterans Housing, the Washington, D.C. House, public safety, scholarships, ARPA money, chapter houses, and what's going on with chapter houses, grants, both that are given, the federal and state grants that are given to the Navajo Nation, small businesses, education, land reform, broadband, and other services that the Navajo people do request and that they often hear there's no money. So those 3 questions are going to be pulled from any of those topics. When she is done answering those questions, we'll be taking questions from the public. We're not going to accept people getting on to, asking the questions. I'll be asking the questions. So you can email me at ecnshiprockcd@gmail.com. That's ECN as in Eugenia Charles Newton, shiprockcd as in council delegate @gmail.com, ECN shiprockcd@gmail.com. Or I'm not going to be taking any text messages because I am using my phone at this point to air what's happening here on Facebook. And then at the end, we're going to have the conclusory or the conclusion, the remarks for concluding this this time that we're giving to Ms. Branch. And Ms. Branch, I will tell you, because you're the first candidate, presidential candidate who is doing this, we do have other candidates who have signed up to do this as well. Because you are the first candidate, I will tell you that some of the questions that I did pull are somewhat easy questions. That's what you get, right? Is because you're the first one. I think that there are questions that are controversial, but I think that there are questions that you will be prepared to answer. So with that, do you have any questions about the procedure at this time?
No, but I can hear like a delayed feed in the background. Can you hear that?
I can't hear the delay feed.
Let me see. I have my off, but I did. Let me see. I'm going to just close. There. Okay. All right. I think it must have been my computer, even though I had the sound off. So I apologize for that little technical issue.
Okay.
Wait. No,
perfect. Well, now we're at 273 views. So we do have 273 people who are currently watching this interview. Are we ready to go, Ms. Branch?
Yeah, I think so. As long as people aren't hearing an echo, because I do still hear it. But yes, Ethel Branch Shinsha, Bipachwatni Nashle, Nakai Bashis Chim, Najini Dashishe, Jo Nakashanella, Intane K Hashchen, East Canyon Diablo, Date Naka, and that's like Loop chapter area. I grew up at a ranch 10 miles south of the Loop community. And the echo is a little distracting, but I'm not sure how to turn that off. And Shema A, Ethel, or Ellen, Billy, Woya, Judah A, Dave Branch, Woya, and then Shema Sana A, Ethel, Spencer, Billy, Woya, and he was from the Coyote Canyon area, Mr. Navajo. If I have family members out there, please let me know. And Chiche A, John Billy, Woya, and from Loop area and Gray Mountain. I have lots of relatives in the Gray Mountain area and Navajo Mountain area as well. And then Chanela Etzan A, Chavez Branch, Woya, and Chanela Hastings, David Branch, Woya, and from sort of the Winslow area, I guess. Yeah, so I currently lead the Navajo and Hopi Families COVID-19 Relief Fund, aka Ye Ha'al Nido, and we launched a pandemic response for the last 2.5 years. We've had 2 different phases of that. It started with a GoFundMe and just sort of, my personal concern for our elders, particularly in remote areas. More than half of our people buy their food off reservation. And I was really concerned. I was hearing things like the state of Arizona was considering shutting down its road systems. And I felt like, oh my gosh, our 13 grocery stores on Navajo Nation have never had to fully supply our domestic population with its food. At any given time, it's only provided half of, or met half of our food needs. And, it's not always been done such a great job of that for those of us who like fresh fruits and vegetables. When I lived in Winter Rock, I had a very hard time getting high quality fresh fruits and vegetables, or at least not even high quality, but just food that would stay fresh in my refrigerator for a few days. So I was just thinking about those things, and many of our elders being without running water or electricity, and being disproportionately vulnerable to COVID. And then was also thinking about the disproportionate percentage of underlying conditions in our community as well. And so I was very concerned. At the time, I was serving as general counsel for Havasupai tribe, and I had helped them shut down their borders entirely. We had a mandatory quarantine period for anyone who wanted to re-enter the reservation, because we understood what an existential threat this presented to the community. And, that was kind of going out on being really aggressive as a sovereign, but we felt like it was important and it was necessary to protect the community. And so I was kind of curious what was happening with Navajo Nation, and saw, of course, the declaration of an emergency. And then sat through a council session, and there was discussion about what we should do as a nation, or whether we should do anything at all. And there really was, there's a lot of debate as usual, but very little action. And there actually was no step taken, which was terrifying to me, just knowing all of this background information. So I was like, okay, I have to do something myself. Like, if our government's not going to act, what can I do as an individual person to make a difference and protect lives in our community? Because we don't know what we're facing. We just know that it is a significant threat. It shut down an entire city of Wudon in China. This is very, very significant. Oh, I did get a text saying there's a lot of feedback back on my end. Are you not hearing that?
No, I can hear you just fine. I don't hear an echo. I'm not having any difficulties on this end, and I've been reading the text messages, and people have been saying you're good, that they can hear you just fine. It might be on your end. Your phone might be close to your computer. Sometimes that's what happens when you might need to mute your computer. But everybody's giving me the thumbs up.
My computer is muted, but I got a text with a lot of feedback on my end. So let me just jump off really fast and make sure everything is closed on my phone. Maybe I'm getting multiple feeds on my phone. And then I'll jump back.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pause the time. Yeah, you're at 14:38, okay. But I'll go ahead and pause it right now.
Okay. I apologize. Give me 1 second.
Okay, so Ms. Branch is going to be joining us again. She's having some technical difficulties on her end. But again, for those of you who are watching, if you want to email me some questions that you would like Ms. Branch to consider, or any of the other candidates, you can email me at ecnshiprockcd@gmail.com. Again, that's ecnshiprockcd@gmail.com. ECN is my initials, Eugenia Charles Newton. Shiprock is the community that I represent, and CD is my title as council delegate. So ecnshiprockcd@gmail.com. And just a little bit of a shout out there: Maggie Johnson, Thomas Bennett, Muriel Nez, Thomas. There is some kind of feedback. I'm on this end. I'm not hearing anything. So hopefully all of you can hear just fine what's happening. Oh, thank you, Brandon Shaggy, for displaying that. Yes, ecnshiprockcd@gmail.com. Kenny Morgan is saying that it's all good there. Everyone can hear her. And then we also have Adrian Rios. Thank you for being a part of today's talk. Tamlin Daniel. Yes, Tamlin, she's asking, will you tell us who you plan to endorse at some point since you interact with all these individuals privately? Yes, I am. I will be endorsing a candidate more than likely when we get close to the primary election. And remember, primary election is scheduled to be in August. So at that time, I will be sharing the candidates. I'm going to be endorsing 2 candidates during that time, and those are the 2 that I'm hoping will proceed forward. But at this point, I cannot and will not endorse any of the candidates because we're still trying to get an idea of what their platform is. Do not vote on popularity. Do not vote just because the candidate speaks Navajo. Do not vote for the candidate, just because they look good. Make sure you understand what their platform is, and that's really what they stand for. It's really important that you also make sure that you, the topics or the issues that are very, very near and dear to your heart, that they are able to answer those questions pertaining to those issues and how they plan to really fix, what's happening. And that's the purpose of us doing this live. I don't see Miss Ethel Branch coming back on the line. I'm hoping that she's able to get everything situated. I don't see her just yet. I think she might be having to turn off a few of her equipment on her end. Melanie Rockwell, she did say yes, at the forum. So based on the forum on Friday, there were 4 candidates that I thought really stood out among the crowd. And those candidates, I based my decision on, well, I shouldn't say my decision, but I based, my, at that point, what I heard from the veterans, also the feedback from the veterans, and then just how, once the talk was completed, what the, how people responded to, to those, to the candidates. And I can say, based on Friday, in no order of, like, I'm not saying number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, but the top 4 candidates are, we did have Boo Nygren, who received a very loud applause as well as a lot of hooping and hollering. We also had Justin Jones, who was also the response from the veterans were very, very loud for him. There was also Earl Sombrero, and then the 4th one that was very interacting with the crowd was Frankie Davis. And so there were 3 candidates that did not show on Friday, and that is Ethel Branch, and then there was also Jonathan Nez and Sandra Jeff. So those 3 candidates did not show on Friday. And so based on Friday's forum, those were the 4 candidates that I, noticed. Utana Brown, hello, Yate. Jeanette News, oh my gosh, I'm so honored for you, Jeanette News, to be here. I'm not sure what's going on. Miss Branch has not gotten back on. Let me see if I can add her again. Oh, because Miss Branch has a candidates page and not a personal page, I can't add her. So she's gonna have to try to add herself to the conversation again. Let's see. Yeah, she's not coming up right now. Miss Ethel Branch, go ahead and try to add yourself to this again, and let's hope that you can get back on. We have 256 viewers right now who are waiting to hear from you as a candidate for the Navajo Nation president. And I'm looking through, and because you have a page that is specific to your campaign. Oh, there you go. There you go. I just sent you an invite. It's adding right now. So Miss Ethel Branch will be joining us again. Oh, there she is.
Hey, yeah,
there she is.
I've been waiting for like 5 minutes.
Oh,
to be
sorry.
So.
Yeah, I didn't see it till just now. I didn't see it till just now.
And I shut down, and then I just reopened Facebook and tried again. So.
Okay. So can you hear can you hear anything on your end now?
No, everything is good now.
Okay.
I did hear you mention that I was not at the Veterans Forum. That's correct. My niece tested positive for COVID on Friday morning. And she has been traveling with me. And I tested negative, but I didn't want to risk exposing folks. So I got my PCR test on Friday. I got my son tested as well. And hopefully the results come back negative, but I am starting to experience symptoms. So I think we probably do have it. And I'm glad we're doing this interview now, because I don't know how capable I will be of interviewing for, the rest of the week. So. But
well, thank you for thinking about the crowd, and thank you for thinking about our veterans. I think I think, if I'm just going to say, if you were a selfish person, you would have shown up. You would have been there regardless of what you know about testing. I can say, Ms. Branch, that I do a lot of traveling. And so I test myself whenever I come back from traveling. And I test myself. I had the Binex kit. And I will not, like, I don't, I try to avoid crowds. So I had to do a quick testing when I came back from Santa Fe in my car, and then it came back negative, and then that's when I went in. So thank you so much for thinking about others.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay. I really wanted to go, but it was like, I can't go. I know that I've had direct exposure. We've been in the car traveling together. She has it, even though I've been testing negative. Yeah, because the rapid test only captures, it only detects that you have COVID if you have symptoms or like a high level of infection in your system.
Yeah.
And so, I was still early. I wasn't experiencing many symptoms, but the PCR test is more sensitive. Just so folks know, if you've had exposure to someone who is testing positive, make sure you get your PCR test, because that can pick it up really early. And then you should also ask for the drugs, the Paxlovid, to make sure that your symptoms are mild. Interestingly, the IHS facility we went to didn't offer that to my niece. So, but she's doing okay. If she's not doing so well tomorrow, I'll probably take her back and demand the meds. But she might be beyond the point where you can take them. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, are we ready to begin? We're still at 14.
Yeah, I can't believe I only have 6 minutes left.
Here we go. Resume. There you go.
Okay, great. I will try to squeeze in as much as I can. So, basically, I've been leading this pandemic effort. We're converting this into a nonprofit. We've started a community center in Monument Valley to work on long-term sustainable change in our community to make us climate change resilient and also pandemic proof. Because the pandemic is not going away, unfortunately, as we're seeing, and climate change is intensifying. But in terms of tackling those issues, people ask me all the time, like, what are you going to do about the running water issue or the lack of electricity? And those are so important in the face of both the pandemic and climate change. And it's like, well, I can't do much with a nonprofit, but a government has large resources. They have bonding authority. They can borrow the $20 billion or whatever the lenders want to give the nation to do the infrastructure projects immediately in the next 4 years. And we can pay that back over time, pledging recurring sources of revenue like our taxes or the highway dollars we get from the feds every year. So, that's why I'm choosing to run for president. I don't want our people to continue to be held hostage by the type of governmental leadership that we've seen that is not compassionate and that is not people-centered and that's not solving these long-standing critical issues that should have been solved like 30 years ago. So anyway, but and I'm also the former Attorney General, so I have a lot of knowledge of how things work in Window Rock and the flaws in our laws and our systems and the balance of powers that exist in our government at this time. And so my platform can be distilled basically to 6 different components. Sorry about my son in the background. I don't have a babysitter because my babysitter is sick, and my other babysitter, I don't want to get her sick. But the first component, I have 6 major pieces. One is drawing on the strength and power of ourselves, the Diné people, the Diné sovereigns. We were an undefeatable, incredibly strong nation for centuries until extreme human rights violations were committed against us. And I don't think we would have ended up as prisoners of war if they weren't, cutting down our orchards and poisoning our water sources and burning our fields. If we had to encounter an occupying nation or an invading nation today, this would not be allowed. Like the world is stepping forward for Ukraine. They would have stepped forward for us as well. So we need to tap back into that incredible strength and use that to guide us. And that's our tradition and our culture and our institutions that are inherently Diné. And so sort of from that flows everything else, like reclaiming our government for the people. That's what the government's supposed to serve. Unfortunately, we have a government designed by our occupiers, and it's designed, unsurprisingly, to serve them and their national security interests as well as their corporate interests. And that's why it's continuing to fail to serve and meet the needs of our people. So we need to redesign that government so that it actually does, like their number one charge is meeting the needs of the people and making sure our people are protected and safe and healthy and have a bright and prosperous future. And then the next component, the third component, is establishing a 4th branch of government. That's talked about in Title I. It's our national security branch. I envision it as something like a National Guard that gives a great source of jobs for our returning veterans who already know how to do emergency response and know how to operate quickly under a very strict chain of command and how to deploy resources quickly and efficiently. And then that's also, we have so many incredible grassroots leaders that step forward during the pandemic, and they have so much love for our people. They're in our communities, and they're continuing to do incredible work for our people to meet their needs on an ongoing basis. And that gives a place for them to go for incredible jobs. We were able to provide 30 jobs during the pandemic for these grassroots leaders to do the direct relief. And so they're out there, and they're incredibly effective, efficient, and driven by a love for the people. And so, this 4th branch of government is really a place for those folks and for our young people returning from college. It could even be something where we have compulsory service, for all our tribal members to serve and in this branch and do things that our people need, like haul water for elders, make sure our elders have food when they're snowbound or when the roads are impassable due to mud. And this is really, really important, again, in the face of intensifying climate conditions. And then also the pandemic. Then you already have this huge, awesome, effective cohort that can quickly deploy PPE resources, like what should be happening right now, because BA2 is on the rise right now. We are on the up curve of a next phase of the pandemic. So, that is the third component. And then the 4th component is really recognizing the wealth that the people have in the land. I come from a grazing family, and we used to graze thousands of sheep, and now we have like 20 sheep, which is still a sizable flock at this time on Navajo Nation. But the land that my family grazed, like we have multiple home sites there, and our government doesn't recognize that. Like we saw that with the fires at Lake Asai, and contests, like reluctance on behalf of the government to recognize that people had multiple home sites. And I just think that's so dehumanizing. Like our government doesn't need to treat our people that way. It's unsurprising when the feds do that, but our government should be honoring with our own laws what our people know and believe to be true in their hearts when it comes to everything, but especially when it comes to land, because land is a source of wealth. It's a source of agency. If our people could, monetize some of the land holdings that they have, their traditional land holdings, that gives them access to the ability to buy their own solar system or drill their own well and solve their own problems at a household level, to provide a home site themselves to their children or their grandchildren without having to ask for permission from the government. We've really shifted that power away from the people by removing and failing to recognize that the rights to the land is in our people. And that's also like where the power comes from. And so by reshifting that back, we put the power back with the people. And then the fourth component, I'm in the fifth one. The fifth one is really about healing and addressing the intergenerational trauma that's in our community. We have these high rates of violence and substance abuse and suicide. And these are all different ways of killing ourselves, right? And there's just this low value of human life in our community. It's really, really challenging, in part because our people have been told in the boarding schools or by the BIA or by outsiders that we're not capable, we're not good enough. And that idea has been passed on to children, and it's fed into behavior. And our people who grew up in the boarding schools, I mean, they were taken when they were like 4, 5, 6, and then many of them were not allowed to go back home until they graduated from high school. So they never grew up in a loving environment with really positive modeling by healthy Dana parents. And so they came home and they raised their own families. And what did they draw on? They drew on the care that they received in their BIA boarding schools, which was not loving, not caring. It killed hundreds of children. It's probably, the death toll is probably going to be hundreds of thousands of our babies that were lost. So we need to replace that knowledge and retrain our people how to exist in this world and how to interact with each other, how to communicate with each other, how to resolve conflict through words and action rather than violence. And to me, this is really going back to our peacemaking system, starting all of our dispute resolution with peacemaking, because that allows the peacemaker to pull in the tools. It allows our people to express fully the depth and the scope of the challenge. I don't agree with the Western system where it's you got 5 minutes and then 5 minutes for rebuttal, or you know what I mean? That doesn't solve problems. That just assigns blame and punishment. And then those people are back in our community. They weren't given the tools to be able to function more healthfully in their families. And then there's continual conflict at the Hogan level and then at the community level. And so I think, this utilizing peacemaking as a way to bring the healing to our community and to give our people the tools, culture-based tools and philosophy based into philosophy, Dana philosophies to solve our problems and to stem the violence in our community and the drug use and the suicides. All of this is interrelated. And then the final thing is reversing language and culture loss through actual investment of money in language and cultural programs. I can't tell you how many times at council I would hear pontification by council delegates in Navajo about the importance of Navajo language and blaming someone for why the situation is the way it is. The blame doesn't matter. Who cares why we're here in the situation now? What matters is what we're going to do to solve this problem and reset the course for our future. And we have to do that by actually investing and taking aggressive measures to reverse what's happening. In 1980, 93% of our people spoke our language. And in 2010, less than half of our people speak our language. By the next census tally, it could be less than a quarter. This is a really important time to reverse that trend and reclaim, our identity, our linguistic identity, our cultural identity, and to also replace the knowledge that has been lost from our language and culture bearers. 2/3 of the people we've lost during the pandemic were our elders, 60 and over. So we have lost a lot of knowledge. We need to replace that. I have a whole suite of programs that would address this. And we have ARPA money that can be used for it. Because one of our impacts was loss of language and culture. And we will probably have federal resources in the wake of this this BIA inquiry to reverse what was lost in those institutions. So that's kind of my platform in a nutshell. Very small, confined space that I had to work with, but I appreciate your parameters. Thank you. Future Madam Speaker.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, future Madam President. So ditto to you too. So you did have 3 minutes and 46 seconds left. Did you still want to use that?
Okay, yeah. Absolutely. So I'll talk a little bit about what those language and culture programs are. So basically, funding fellowships for our remaining language and culture bearers, so that our elders, all they have to do to feed themselves and take care of themselves is just share their language and cultural knowledge with sort of the next crop of bearers, which would be funded, mentor, or I forget what the term is that I use. But those folks would be paid to learn from the fellow and capture all of their knowledge and carry that into the future. And then, of course, the fellows would also be doing things like participating with sharing knowledge at schools. And I mean, there would be a lot of things involved in that fellowship to make sure that there was that aggressive transmission of language and cultural knowledge. So that's one thing. And then also actually developing a language and culture institute where we're, building a repository of knowledge insofar as we can. And then also just having a space where we can do intensive immersion programming so that when our young people come home, they have a place to go for like 3 months and just get back up to speed on their language skills and cultural knowledge, and basically renaturalize into our community. And that's also a space that I think every single Navajo Nation employee should go to. That way they have, some minimum level of fluency. And this sets us on the course for our government to really do all of its business in Diné language, and for us to change our signs from English to Diné, and really take these bold actions of nation building through use of language. And so that's one component. And then having summer programs that our youth can participate in, after school programs. This is something other groups do, like Koreans in America, Jewish in America, Chinese people. They after school, they send their kid to basically like Korea school, and there they learn their language and their culture. And so we need to be doing that, right? Like, we need to work with the schools to make sure that they'll give us space to deliver the programming that needs to happen for our children. And we also need to be holding them to task in terms of meeting our language and culture standards that are set forth in the Diné School Accountability Plan. And we also have to have our like really robust standards, right, at like the grade level, so we know like where we want our kids to be every step of the way. So that's really important. And then in terms of the summer programs, there are already some really incredible language and culture camps out there that people at the grassroots level are developing. So, funding those programs and trying to stimulate as many of those as possible so that all of our children have access to that resource, and also making this resource accessible in the urban areas to our off-reservation tribal members, because otherwise, if we just leave people to their own devices, it's really hard. So providing that space, that structure, that opportunity for our urban children to be learning our language in an after-school program and a summer program, I think it's really, really important to ensuring that we continue as Diné people, because with the loss of our people, the massive out-migration, we're losing our language and our culture and our identity as Diné people. And that's what I'm fighting against. That's why I'm voting for president, because we have lost so many people. Again, in 1980, only 21% of our people lived off reservation, and now more than half of them do. Where is this going? Okay.
Sorry.
Wish I had more time, but
I know. I kind of have to keep it structured so that we can keep it, fair across the board for the other candidates. Thank you so much for sharing that. And while you were talking, I was typing some of the, some of the highlights that I want to, or the points that I want to highlight a little bit. And thank you for sharing your platform with us. I want to talk to you a little bit about the land. And so this is kind of in the current Navajo Nation. We have discussed this issue, and it really is a perfect segue into what you talked about, the importance of, coming from a grazing family. And I loved what you said about solving our own problems at the household level. I think that is a huge part of being an elected official, is trying to convey that message that a lot of, what the issues that are happening right now really do kind of happen at the Hogan level, or at the foundation of the home. And you did touch upon that. So thank you for doing that. So I will say, number one is thank you for being a mom and running. Hearing your son in the background, I was reading some of the comments, people saying, pick up the baby. And somebody commented, she's a mom. She knows how to multitask. As mothers, that's kind of it's something that we're born with, right? We know how to multitask. I used to laugh and say I could have a baby on my hip, stirring food and be on the phone at the same time, and that's part of like the
Yeah.
multitasking, right? So thank you so much for, having being online, and then also, just being a mom. I think that is so important, is, the fact that you are a mom. And that, yes, your son was in the background and we could hear him, but I think that was really adorable. I think you paid him to
He's
do that,
adorable.
didn't you?
Yeah, being a mother, when I was really little, I wanted to have a huge family. And then there was one summer when my grandpa and my dad were both in the hospital, in different hospitals, and my mom was gone. And all of my nieces and nephews stayed with us at the ranch. And I had to cook for all the kids. And so I was like, no, never mind. I don't want to.
I've rethought the having multiple children. Well, my husband and I, so I've shared it multiple times, but my husband and I will be celebrating our silver anniversary this year. 25 years we've been married.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah. I was teasing myself. I don't know who deserves the medal, you or me. But we made it work. And we, at one time, I remember my husband said that he wanted 8 kids. And I said, well, I'll have your first one. And I said, I don't know about the rest of them. But we were fortunate in that, I was blessed, and where we were blessed, we were able to have one child. And after that, I wasn't able to have any more children. But I just feel really blessed that I can at least say that I'm a mother, and that, I am a mother of one. And I tell my son all the time, he may be one child, but sometimes he makes it feel like I've got 5 kids, because he could, he's 5 times the problem sometimes. Yeah. But thank you so much for being on. And
I have to say, having my son is the very best, the most important accomplishment of my life.
Right.
Being a mom is like the most rewarding thing, like every single day. It's just amazing, and it's so great. So I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to be the mom to that little guy.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad, and I'm glad that he was also a part of this as well. So again, I kind of want to touch upon 2 things that you talked about. Number one, again, is the land. You talked about the grazing, coming from a grazing family. The Navajo Nation currently has within their laws an eminent domain clause. I'm sure you are aware of that eminent domain clause, but it can be found in title.
Yeah.
It's in Title 1, of the Navajo Nation Code. And the eminent domain clause basically, says that the tribe has the power to take, or they have the authorization to take property without the consent of the owners, or the property of anybody who holds any interest in that particular land that they're looking at, provided that the owners are given due process of law and just compensation as well. At the Navajo Nation Council, there has been several discussions on whether we should engage in eminent domain, and the purpose of that is because you are correct in that we do have funding for water. We have funding for electricity. One of the big issues that we do run into is when a family says no. So you might have 2 feuding families, family A that may have access to the water and the electricity, who lives right next to family B, but they're not granting the electricity and the water to go through their land to give B the water and electricity that they need. I'm sure when you were Attorney General of the Navajo Nation, you heard many of those disputes come through. And I'm kind of almost positive that at one time when you were Attorney General, that question did come up at council as well. And really, I think that a lot of delegates don't want to be the bad guy. They don't want to be the person, who is claiming, who's acting under the powers of eminent domain, even though that law has been authorized by the Navajo Nation Council and it has been interpreted, within a case that has been decided by the Navajo Nation Supreme Court, Dennison versus Tucson Gas and Electric Company. But where do you stand on eminent domain and providing people water and electricity, and also possibly broadband that is needed to help combat COVID-19? Ms. Branch, I'm going to go ahead and give you some time to answer that question, and you'll have 15 minutes to elaborate a little bit more on that. Mm-hmm. The floor is yours.
Sure. I mean, I haven't heard of that situation where someone gets their own electricity and water and then they don't want the continuation of the lines to the next household. In that situation, I feel like that should be part of the agreement to get the initial water and electricity to the family, that they will consent to continuation of that pipeline and electrical line through their grazing area. So that's something that, the negotiating team should be thinking about on the front end. And putting in place to make sure that there's no disruption in the development project. And that, gets us around having to deal with eminent domain. But I think in terms of just generally utilizing eminent domain as a tool, I think that the initial thing that has to happen is the perfection of traditional title, right? And clearing up those boundaries in terms of like whose grazing area is where. Like what are the lines on those? And I think, again, this is an area where peacemaking could be very useful, because then it's about like, how do we share or expand the pie, or like, divvy this up and create a fair solution that everybody can talk through and feel comfortable with. So I think that would be really, really important, because if you're just doing eminent domain and you're not clear about whose grazing area you're impacting, then that's when people get really upset, because they weren't consulted with on the front end, and their rights are being impaired. And this happens a lot. I mean, this happens a lot on Navajo Nation, where decisions are made and they're just imposed on people. I don't agree with that. I think there needs to be notice and consultation with the impacted parties, and there needs to be an effort to come to a mutually beneficial agreement. And there also needs to be kind of standardization. Like I know NTUA does some agreements with families to get the right of ways in place, but there's no sharing of that information so that people can understand, to make sure that everybody's getting paid the fair amount and the same amount for allowing that access through their land. So, and I think that's just an issue of basic respect for our people. But I think we do need to walk away from that concept of, this is all federal land, this is all Navajo Nation land. No, that is our people's land. The reason why that is part of the Navajo Nation is because our people returned to that land, and they created law in order to avoid warfare and conflict post-treaty. The United States government was forced to expand the boundaries of our nation in deference to the de facto law that our people created by returning to their original grazing areas. And so we need to honor and respect that, and recognize that that land is our people's land. And the only reason we have a government is because of the sovereignty that flows from our people to this government. So that's kind of my view on eminent domain. And I think, when I talk about land reform, there's a lot to it. It's not just perfecting traditional title, but it's also developing a comprehensive development plan for Navajo Nation, and talking about setting aside public lands that we can all have access to for recreational purposes, that we can utilize to be the foundation for a really robust tourism economy. We are the reason why people come to Arizona and New Mexico and southern Utah to a certain extent. They come for Monument Valley, Canyon de Chelly, Window Rock even, and the Grand Canyon, of course, and we are right alongside the Grand Canyon. So we need to utilize that opportunity. We have millions of dollars that flow through our nation every year, and we have almost no point of sale opportunities to capture those dollars. So, we need to be working on that. And developing public lands is part of that. And then also, deciding, setting aside, like, these are culturally important areas where we don't want people developing homes. We don't want people putting in a helium pad, those sorts of things, or like, this area is really important to keep undeveloped because it is a major recharge area for our aquifer, or like, this is a watershed we really need to keep free of contaminants. So we need to start doing that type of planning, and also just like growth planning, right? Like, let's make Chinle the place that everybody shops instead of Flagstaff or Gallup. Let's make it so cool that people from Gallup come to Chinle to go to the Target because they can't get that in Gallup, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's a real opportunity, because even like southern Utah, like, there aren't really great places for people to go shopping. We could create that major economic hub in the center of our nation. But having a development plan helps us have that conversation. And once we decide, these are the areas where we really want to focus growth, then we can start talking about, well, let's do zoning, and let's make sure that, and that's where eminent domain comes in, right? Like, okay, we want to expand the boundaries of Chinle, as a city. Like, now we know we want this to be a 20 square mile city or whatever. I don't even know what that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's too huge when I think about how big that. Okay, a 10 square mile city, right? Then we can move forward and start negotiating with families, talking about whether or how we want to utilize eminent domain. And we can do these turnkey home sites and business sites and planned communities. And that way, all of the cultural clearance has been done, all of the surveying, all of the environmental clearance. That way, all people have to do is go buy the piece of paper that says they have the right to that area to build their home. And for a business site, to build a business. And we've already put in the infrastructure. We've already identified the boundaries of the site that they'll be purchasing. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I can say honestly that was actually one of the questions. It wasn't specific to eminent domain, but really, what is your plan for addressing kind of the leasing issues that we're running into, not only with business leases, but also home site lease. And then, you have your grazing rights. There's like so many different types of leases that people are required to have. And you have knowledge of that. So what are your thoughts on that? And then how do you plan to address those types of leases?
Yeah, I
or
think
requirements, I should say.
That system doesn't work. Again, this was created by our occupying nation. It was not designed to work well for our people. It doesn't work well for our people. It disrespects their humanity and their rights to land. And it like shifts all of the rights to the government and steals that from the people. Like the idea that someone has only an acre to live on, and that doesn't recognize seasonal home sites. Okay, well, let's talk about grazing. Why do you think grazing is an issue? Because people can only graze in one area now. They can't continue migrating with the seasons and allow the land to lay fallow so that it can recharge. But you're getting me on a different tangent. But all of these things are kind of interrelated, and that's why I feel like land reform that's the foundational issue. We have to take on that challenge, unlock that opportunity for our people in order to have growth and development and prosperity and wealth in our community. Like, I don't want our people to just survive. I want our people to thrive. And we have to recognize the rights that our people have always held in the land that our government has denied or ignored or tried to take away. So it is unnecessarily complex. Navajo people are not, they're simple people, right? Like, yeah. I'm a simple person myself. I don't want to have to deal with all these stupid clearances and honestly, like, I don't even want to. I've thought about applying for a home site lease near my mom's house, but like, there are so many overlapping claims. Like, if I did that, it could disrupt the balance in our community, like the harmony that does exist there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to create conflict, even though like our family was the original family in the area. But you know, like that's because of the way the system is right now. It breeds this conflict and the fights that happen relating to our lands because of all of the uncertainty. We need to create certainty in the system. We need to create easy transferability and monetization for our people so they can access the wealth and, you know, again, like I said, solve their own problems. And yeah, we're a reservation, but you know, property law is a really flexible thing.
Yeah.
This is one of my highest scoring, highest grades in law school and the bar exam. But you know, law is a tool to reflect and create reality, and especially the case with property law. You know, like in New York, you can own like half of an apartment. You can own that, you know, like if you can do that, why can't we create this registry system, this overlay to the Indian trust system, so we're not disrupting tribal jurisdiction, those sorts of issues, but we're recognizing in the law, again, what our people believe to be true, and something that is more simple to understand than the current system where things change based on what region you're in. It's unnecessarily complex, and then that complexity makes it an intimidating system to approach if you're a young person wanting to come home from college and get a home site. And then of course there's the social complexity as well that I talked about, you know, like not wanting to disrupt harmony in the community because of all of the uncertainty and the multiple contests and claims and whatnot. So anyway, yeah, I don't think that the current system works. And the other problem is there are all these really ridiculous requirements that are in place for a home site lease. Like you can't run your business out of your home. I mean, come on. Where are people supposed to run their businesses out of? You know, it's not like you can easily get a business site lease. Like, do we want to support economic development in our community or not? That's a very simple change that could be made in our laws. And the problem is what we've done, you know, there was the federal leasing system, and, you know, like Navajo likes to do, you know, we like to say we're taking things over, but the only reason the feds give us that authority is if we accept their laws and we put our name on the top of it. And that's what we did with our land leasing regulations. We say it's Navajo law, but like if we were to draft it ourselves, is that really how we would have written it? No. And so we need to do that exercise.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Well,
we just have to stop.
say,
we have to stop playing around. We are a nation. Our sovereignty predates the United States. We get our inherent sovereign authority from ourselves, from our people. You know, instead of playing at this game and playing within the sandbox the United States government has created for us, we need to assert our inherent authority and retake control of our destiny. And we have to do that through revising laws, by creating a government that actually serves our people and meets the needs of our people.
Thank you for that, Ms. Branch. I was just now looking at the law, and I did notice that technically, not to put you on the spot here, Ms. Branch, but the home site lease regulations happened in 2016. I believe that you were the Attorney General at that time. On the regulation itself, it does state that it was prepared and approved by the Navajo Land Department, the Division of Natural Resources, and the Department of Justice. So technically, I think from reading this, from reading the home site lease regulations, you were the Attorney General at that time. And so what you're talking about with the changes that should happen, and just kind of this notion of how we need to fix the land laws. It was approved October 4th of 2016 through RDCO-74-16. So how do you then explain the approval through the Department of Justice, and you guys signing off on these new home site lease regulation laws?
Yeah, I mean, so the sign off it's legally sufficient, but we don't at the Department of Justice get to decide policy questions. That is the role of counsel, and that's the role of the president. Our job is basically, as technicians, we get the policy guidance from the elected officials, and we help them achieve what they're seeking to achieve. And so, what we did was, at the direction of counsel, the Attorney General serves at the pleasure of the council. I don't get to decide myself, this is dumb, and y'all aren't acting as real sovereigns. I'd probably be removed if I did that. I can't, as the Attorney General, I don't get to dictate policy to the elected leaders who have the direct accountability to the people. So that's why I'm running for president and not trying to be the next Attorney General. Because there's
Thank
no
you for making
policy.
No, thank you for making that clarification, Ms. Branch. And I think that a lot of our listeners, right now, at least those who have spoken to me are always saying that's one of the things that I'm able to provide is kind of some insight into the way that our Navajo Nation functions and the way that it doesn't function. And it sounds like, at least this is my first term as a council delegate. I can say honestly that there is a lot of dysfunction in the Navajo Nation, and I'm sure you can agree with me on that, because that's why you are running to be president, is to try to fix some of this dysfunction. But we are currently looking at the home site lease regulations right now, and again, this was approved in 2016. It is ridiculous that we're only allotting 1 acre of land to a family, or we're not allowing in some cases, cattle to be on that home site, that home site lease. You can't run a business off of that home site lease, but here in Shiprock, we have a lot of people who are running businesses off of their home site lease. There's just been so many changes. You can't technically have 2 homes on a home site lease, which is interesting because you can have a house, but you can't have a hogan. And so it seems like, because a hogan is considered to be a house. Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing, Eugenia, is that NTUA won't run water and power lines to that additional house, right? Because they'll be like, well, it's not basically legal, which also is dumb. I want to get our government out of our people's business, our government is so jealous. They want to be like the only game in town for everything. They want to be involved in every little thing that's happening in people's day-to-day lives. But then when the people are like, well, we want your help, in my day-to-day life, then the government's like, do it yourself. Why do you keep coming to me asking for things? And why are you so dependent on us? Solve your own problems. It's like, you created this system. You created this hyper dependency. Our government has made our nation uninhabitable by folks who aren't dependent on governmental services. Like, the only source of housing that people can just come home and access is NHA housing, and you have to qualify for that on income guidelines. So it's like, if you want to change this, then we need to start recognizing the power in the people and start pulling back and getting the government back under control and out of people's lives. Like, I hear things all the time, like, the government should make everyone stop grazing. Like, what the heck is the government's business in people's lives and managing their land? Like, if you actually are a grazer, you're trying to also preserve the health of your land, because you economically rely on the viability of your herd. What the government needs to do is do what only government can do, and then get out of the way for everything else. And that's what I'd be seeking to do with a lot of the reform that I'm trying to do here, because we have created this quagmire. I mean, it's like quicksand, our people get stuck. And they're being told that what they're doing is illegal, having this additional house. And so what are they supposed to do? Overcrowd one house? It's just, it is so disrespectful to the humanity of our people. and to,
Well,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, well, it's so interesting that, that we're talking about land reform, and we're talking about
Oh. Uh-oh.
running for Navajo Nation president. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you kind of froze for a second, but I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So looking at this 2016, this regulation for home sites, it does state on page 1 that the Navajo Nation divisions, the grazing officials, the chapter officials, the chapter administration, employees, land board, farm board, BIA, they kind of have a list of all of the people who were really involved in generating this 2016 home site lease regulation, which brings me into my next question, and that is because specifically on this home site lease regulation, again, it was passed in 2016. There is currently a legislation that does have the laws of this home site lease, and that's RDCO-74-16. This brings me then to the next question. Now,
I'm sorry.
there's been a lot of issues with chapters you talked about.
Your feed is breaking up. So I heard you say, I think you were introducing the question, but then it froze and I didn't hear anything.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My AirPod just went out. I think that may be it. So let me go ahead and change sides here. Just when we were getting into like the nitty gritty of what has to change with land reform.
Well, I mean, you're going to ask me 3 questions, right? And we've been on for more than an hour. So are you just going to be
asking? And these are actually questions that, those were the questions. So number 1, it was specific to land reform. And I was just kind of bringing it back to the fact that you did bring that up in your platform about how the land reform needs to be changed. So I did have specifically a question regarding the home site lease laws and the 2016 home site lease regulation that had to happen. Does that make sense?
I think the only question you've really asked me is grazing and eminent domain. And then you kind of had a sub question about the lease regulations. So I feel like I've only answered 1 question.
Yes, you've only answered 1 question. And that was on land.
Yeah. So are we going to answer 2 more questions because we have 15 minutes left?
2 more questions. No. So each of them I'm trying to limit so your response to the questions. So the next question right now is regarding the chapters. So your platform technically opened up the door, for the questions that are being generated right now. And I did already have 3 specific questions that were laid out. And one of them did deal with land reform. And that's what we just now talked about, the laws that have to be changed. And it was a perfect introduction because you talked about it in your platform. The second one is specific to chapters. And so I know with under chapters, I guess it's another segue from the land, the home site lease laws or the land regulations that were passed and how the chapters had something to do with that. So now my next question is under Title 26, the chapters do have certain authorities for local government. This notion was developed by Albert Hale when he was president of the Navajo Nation. I'm sure you've heard, you've heard about the local government power. You've mentioned it yourself, giving power back to the people, letting them decide, I guess in this case with the land issues, they have to be a part of that. And as you know, with COVID-19, that really limited the ability of our people to be able to participate in government because of what happened, because of this COVID that was going around. And so my question to you now, Ms. Branch, is under Title 26 with the chapters, how do you envision chapters working with the people?
Under Title 26?
Yes.
I think they do an awesome job of working with the people under Title 26. When the rest of Navajo chapters had to shut down under an executive branch authority, the only people out there saving lives and protecting our people were the certified chapters who had their independent authority recognized under the LGA. They did a phenomenal job, like Chinle chapter, Standing Rock, Rama. I mean, the folks who were out there delivering aid to our people were certified chapter employees. And I think that is a testament to the strength of certified chapters and the LGA. And that actually does provide the vehicle for local leasing authority. And that could be the way to move forward with comprehensive land reform in terms of, going to the local government and presenting, having them opt in directly through that means, because they can utilize the inherent authority that they have, and we can just give them that model for how to do it. And so they can have that tool in place and run with it immediately. And you don't even have to go through council to get that done. So yeah, I think the LGA has been really, really great. It scares the dickens out of the Department of Justice, which is good because they shouldn't be trying to control everything and getting in everyone's business. It should be the chapters who are doing that. And there's some great chapters doing incredible things. They're doing incredible planning for economic development and actually meeting the needs of their communities, which they should be doing. So I'm fully supportive of LGA. Although I think we're kind of at a point where we've seen the experimentation in our community, and we really need to be having that conversation about regionalization, because we don't have enough manpower at the local level. We don't have enough accountants to make sure that every chapter has an accountant on staff or an attorney. We don't have enough attorneys to ensure that there are enough attorneys on staff for all of these different chapters. And the Department of Justice has 2 or 3 attorneys dedicated to the 110 chapters, and every single chapter to do one single thing. They probably need 5 attorneys just to research whether they can do that one thing. That's why LGA is not taking off as quickly as it could and should, because our environment is so highly legally complex that to do anything, you have to have 3 to 5 attorneys look at that issue. And we need to eliminate that complexity because 1, we don't have enough attorneys in our community. And 2, it shouldn't be that hard. It's not that hard in any other community in this country. You don't have to have as many attorneys involved in doing business anywhere else. So we shouldn't be creating those fake rules and fake complexities, unnecessary complexities ourselves, and tying the hands of our own people to solve problems at the local level. And that goes for our government officials as well.
Well, thank you. And I want to talk to you a little bit. So, just kind of educating our listeners who are listening in right now. You talked about the LGA certified chapters. As far as I know, I think there are 34 LGA certified chapters of the 110. And so, when you say that the LGA certified chapters are doing a really good job in doing their work, that's 34 chapters in 34 communities. So, number one, if you can explain to the Navajo people the difference between an LGA certified chapter and a non-LGA certified chapter, and then the powers that they both have in terms of providing services to the Navajo people, Ms. Branch.
Yeah, I probably had to pull up the code provisions to walk you through that. And I was not shared these questions in advance, and probably no other candidate is going to be able to answer this question very well. But I did write my substantial paper in law school, my joint program in the law school and the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard on Navajo governmental reform. And I looked at very closely at the Local Governance Act and looked at different governance models that were being utilized in our community. So I'm just going off of memory from those many years ago. Every other chapter in Navajo Nation government is under the executive branch. They basically report to the president, and they have basically all the same requirements and rules that apply to them. And that's how all of the chapters started out. It's just like regular chapters. And then President Hale had this great vision to kind of stir things up and allow for local control. and for local communities to set the course for their own destinies, right? And it was a tool to get Window Rock out of the way, basically. And it's brilliant in that respect, and it's been effective at that in some ways. So, you know, there's an opportunity under Title 26 to petition for certification as a chapter, and you have to have, it's like your 5M management plan in place. So basically, like the local government that wants to proceed with this has to pass a resolution saying that they want to do this, and then they have to put in place their management plan, which basically replaces the different things that the different rules and requirements that would apply if they were a normal chapter. So they have to have like a fiscal policy and like the design of their government, like who's going to make the decisions and how, and like all these different components in place to ensure that the local government continues to function in a meaningful way without the framework that comes from Window Rock. And so they get all of these really incredible devolution of authorities, essentially, from central government to local government if they are successful in putting in place their plan. And some of that, it includes like zoning, local land leasing authority, tax authority. Let's see, what else are some of the big ones? Those are the main ones that come to mind that have been really, really powerful. So like Tuba City getting their taxes directly, and they get a lot of tax revenue. And then they have more direct control over how they spend those dollars. So,
yeah. Well, yeah, you did good. You did very well. And I think that there's been a lot of confusion among our Navajo people in terms of the way that the government functions. And I've often questioned, you know, how does chapters work within our government? You know, how, like, where do they sit? You know, because, and I asked that question, Ms. Branch, because, you know, we did have a DOJ attorney who basically on the record said that that chapters are kind of separate. In that, you know, it's always a question of who do the chapter officials, you know, who do they report to? Who are they accountable to? And so my understanding is that that the chapter officials are accountable to the people. And that's what I heard when the presentation was given to us. And you just now talked about how the chapters are kind of falling under the executive branch. So I think that the powers of the chapters is such an important issue, especially in this term of election, because there were a lot of people during COVID that didn't receive assistance from their chapters. There's been so much mixed information about the chapters. Some people are reporting that their chapters were not open during COVID. I know that we got reports in council about one chapter that locked their gate so that people couldn't come in, but there were people who were in the chapter. Some chapters were open throughout COVID. They allowed people to come in, you know, anybody that needed assistance, they made it available to them. Some chapters didn't even offer assistance. So you have 110 chapters that vary in the way that they provide services and assistance to the people. So my question to you as a candidate for the Navajo Nation president, in terms of the questions that I prepared for you here, is what part of Title 26 needs to be changed in that with the vision that was set out. I believe it was in 1998 was when the vision was set out by former President Albert Hale at that time, when he brought forward the notion of LGA certified chapters and non-certified chapters. Since that time in the 1990s, when that notion was brought forward, we still have over 50 chapters that have not been LGA certified. And one of the big issues that we run into, again, as I stated already, are services not being provided to the Navajo people. There's also limited accountability. We just recently got information from the Auditor General, who said that there's not enough auditors to be able to audit the 110 chapters. You just now mentioned, you know, the limited number of attorneys that are assisting within the chapter division. So how do we fix, or maybe I shouldn't say fix, what are your ideas in that local governance, giving power back to the people and ensuring that they are given the services that they need at the local level? Ms. Branch?
Yeah. Well, I come from Loop Chapter, which was the first chapter of the Navajo Nation government. Lots of great government changes have come out of Loop. Again, the only chapters that were open during the pandemic were the certified chapters. The other ones were part of the executive branch, and the president shut those down. So they were not allowed to do business until he lifted that order. So, I just wanted to clarify that. And so that's partially why services were uneven across the nation with respect to the chapters. But in terms of, like what part of Title 26, like that's not what I'm here to talk about, because that's going to bore. Nobody's going to know what the heck I'm talking about. So I'm just going to answer really broadly, because this is part of that comprehensive governmental reform. Like we need to look at what's working and build that momentum, right? We have these 35 chapters, whatever it is, whatever the number is, and some of them have really good models of what the possibilities are with that opportunity. And so let's run with that. Let's build on that. Like Johnny Johnson out of Standing Rock was serving like 20 communities, and Kevin out of Sheep Springs was serving 20 communities in his region because all the other chapters were shut down. And so, like what is emerging, what has emerged during the pandemic, and same thing with Chinle, they were serving like all central agency basically. And so, that is working really well. These regional distribution points, these regional strong governments. And so why not firm up those boundaries? We have chapter governments, and then we have our central government. We have nothing in between, and we have almost nothing smaller than that. We don't have municipal governments except essentially for Kanta Township. And that is working really well. We're seeing really great economic development in Kanta because they have that local ownership of, beautifying and developing and building the municipality of Kanta. So like that's probably something we need in other communities as well. Maybe not every single community, but we have 10 growth hubs on Navajo Nation right now. So why not ensure that each of those has a municipality, like a local government, like super local government. And then the chapters start to look more like counties at that point, right? But they don't all, like we've been discussing, they don't all have the human capital to function at a high level. So, maybe there's some consolidation that needs to happen there, right? And I'm not talking about like blending chapter boundaries necessarily, or eliminating the local officials. What I'm talking about is regionalizing the resources, like making sure there's an accountant in this particular region, and like there's an attorney, a local attorney in this particular region that's servicing all of, and it starts to sound like, the ASC system, but it's more organic. It's coming from like the facts on the ground and the momentum that's already in place in our communities with these emerging, really strong LGA certified governments that are in fact serving entire regions, not just their own chapters. And then they run into these challenges, right? Where they're told sometimes, the BIM says I can only serve my chapter members, enrolled chapter members. And that's, it's like, but that means that the neighboring chapter members aren't going to get services at all. And so by somewhat consolidating these into regions and allowing those strong governments to serve all of the governments and all of the people in that region, then we start making some progress and making sure they have that human capital in terms of the administrative staff that they need. Even like the chapter managers, right? Some chapters struggle to get good chapter managers. It shouldn't be that way. There are good people out there that are already doing great work, and they want to serve more than just their community. So we should make that possible. So this is, having that conversation with the Diné people, like what do you want to see? Like what actually helps you in your day-to-day life, so that you get the services that you need, you get the water that you need, you get the trash services that you need, or whatever it is, that you get the firewood that you need, or the PPE. So I don't have like I have an idea of where this could go, because I wrote my substantial paper on that in grad school. Because this gets us kind of back to traditional governance models, right? Like, the regional Natani, the war and peace chiefs, the Nutch-Id coming together. Like, there is a way, I think there's a path forward to restructuring our government so that it's more like that. And it's more responsive to the needs of our people, because there's greater accountability of the leaders at the local level. There's a lot we could talk about in terms of government reform, but essentially, when you look at ourselves and you look at like the Pueblos, right? There's like 20 of them. I don't see that much difference in terms of, we at one time were a confederacy. We had our local leaders, and that's who was accountable to the local people. And we came together to create strength as a nation, essentially, in times of need, like if there was a drought or a food shortage, or warfare, military challenges from neighbors. But we weren't bound, each of us, to do what everybody else was doing. One region could ally with another region and could go to war with the Mexicans or whatever, and then someone else could say, well, we'll give you some of our corn, to help you in this time, but like not everybody had to give their corn. So I think we need to recreate that flexibility, and that's kind of like, with the Pueblos, each of them got recognized as an individual tribe, but we were only recognized as one nation, which has been kind of problematic in terms of the feds thinking, Navajo is this big thing and we shouldn't give all the resources to Navajo, but they should, based on our population and our needs, especially when it comes to public safety needs. They should be sending disproportionate resources to our community, because we have disproportionate needs and a disproportionately high population, but they won't do it because we're only one nation. Whereas, and that would be an interesting comparison to actually look at, compare our public safety funding levels to the aggregate amount that gets sent to all of the Pueblos, and like what's the per capita breakdown for that between a Navajo tribal member and a Pueblo tribal member.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So this is actually the last question. We're going to shift gears here. In terms of, so we're going to talk a little bit about ARPA money. There's currently 2 legislations that have been passed, CJY-41-21, which basically established the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund and the expenditure authorization process. It waived certain provisions of the Navajo Nation Appropriations Act. It amended 12 NNC Section 334, which authorizes emergency procurement. It authorizes reimbursement of the Citizen Fund, and then also the UUFB, the Undesignated Unreserved Fund Balance. It authorized central support and regulatory cost funding. It authorized funding to complete defunded Navajo Nation CARES Fund expenditure plans, and then authorized the establishment of a Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund office within the Office of the President and the Vice President. So that's under CJY-41-21. There was another legislation that was passed, and that was CD-62-21, and that allocated $557 million of the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Funds, which is technically the ARPA funds, and it approved the Navajo Nation Fiscal Recovery Fund Hardship Assistance Expenditure Plan. It waived certain provisions of Navajo Nation Council Resolution CJY-41-21. Specifically, I believe that President Nez and Council had voted to only give a small portion of ARPA money for hardship money, but then we went back and amended that. And then also it waived certain provisions that were required under the Budget and Finance legislation BFS-31-21. I know that that's a lot to take in.
I'm very familiar with all of that. So
Okay, good, good, good. Here we go. Okay, so you also know that 0086-22 and 0087-22, which are two competing legislations for the remaining funds left in ARPA, are being presented to council right now. 0086-22, which I often term the Freeland-Nez legislation, because this one, I know that President Nez has been lobbying councils hard. This is his re-elect me, last chance, to get the people, to rally behind him. He did ask Delegate Freeland to sponsor the legislation, and we do have several of the men who are in support of this legislation, but it's allocating $1,070,298,867 of the ARPA money, and it's basically giving it to chapter assistance, to public safety emergency communication, E911, rural addressing projects, cybersecurity, public health projects, economic development projects, hardship assistance, because we're short on the 557 that was given. There is a shortage because of the amount of Navajo people who have been getting their Navajo CIBs. It's also giving money to water and wastewater projects, broadband projects, home electricity connection and electricity capacity projects, housing projects, a manufacturing housing facility, bathroom addition projects, construction contingency funds, and then also reduced administrative funding.
1 second, my son just went out the front door, so
Let's
go.
Go ahead.
Okay, just give me like 5 minutes, okay, sweetheart? 5 minutes, and then we'll go with your truck. Okay. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. You're a mom. You're fine. Okay, so that's under the Freeland-Nez legislation, and then you have Delegate Crotty, who also introduced legislation 0087-22, which would give that remaining $1,070,298,867 of the ARPA money for regional and chapter projects. And basically saying that these chapter project expenditure plans, should be reviewed and they should be approved, so that money can go towards, again, regional and chapter projects. So my question to you is, obviously, if the people select you to move forward, through the primary, through the general, and if you are voted to be president of the Navajo Nation, you're going to be left having to deal with what the 24th Navajo Nation Council and President Nez has decided for you. And I think that is such an important part of this next presidential election, is that really is the reality, is we're going to be deciding the way that this money should be spent. The implementation will somewhat start, but you're going to be picking it up to finish the projects, again, that are already going to be laid out to you. So what I want to ask you is, of the two legislations that have been presented right now to council that's currently going to be debated, which legislation do you agree with? What questions do you have of the legislation? And if you could, your other option is you could combine both legislations to create a whole new legislation. Since you have been keeping up with what's been happening with the ARPA money, I'd like to get your input on this, again, because I'm going to be positive here and say, when you're elected president of the Navajo Nation, when you're going to be our first woman president, this is one of the first things that you're going to have to deal with. So talk to us a little bit about the ARPA money and your idea, the way that these funds should be spent. Ms. Branch?
Okay. I have a lot of respect for you, Delegate Charles Newton. So please, I don't mean this to you personally in any way, but this actually angers me quite a big bit. We received our initial ARPA money on May 28th of last year. It has been over a year that we've had over $2 billion to protect our community. And that money is just sitting there. To have $1 billion still in the bank, I did the numbers, I compared the statistics. Since May 28th of 2021, we have had 23,320 additional cases of COVID in our community. That's an increase of that's about 43% more cases that we have experienced in our community while our tribal government leaders have been sitting on this money. Those are cases that could have been prevented. And then in terms of the people that we've lost, you know, comparing May 28th and May 27th of last year and May 27th of this year, we've lost almost an additional 500 people, 468 to be exact. That's a quarter of the people we've lost during this entire pandemic. And those are lives that could have been saved. And, you know, we need our leaders in Window Rock to come together and set aside their egos and think about the good of the people and our community and find a compromise. You know, if you need to bring in peacemakers, please do. So I don't agree with either of these pieces of legislation. You know, this is like Groundhog Day. You know, we had two competing pieces of legislation not that long ago, and those failed at the last council session. And now we have these two. I'm so shocked that we still have two pieces of legislation. You haven't had one.
You're good. There was a little glitch, but you're good. Keep going. Okay. Get mad. Get mad.
I am mad.
This is Let's Talk Politics. So let's talk politics. Get mad if you have to. I'm not taking any personal offense to this. Honestly, it needs to be said. Say it.
I think we need to lock our president and our council delegates into a room and not let them out until they have come up with a compromise and they have a plan. Because like I said, BA2 is on the rise right now. Our people are going to need more PPE. They need that now. Our IHS facilities need help making sure that they have adequate supply of the drugs to increase the likelihood that our people will survive this wave. So it's totally unacceptable that it's taken more than a year to spend this money. You know, this is $2 billion. And, you know, additionally, I don't think we should be happy about getting $2 billion because that's chump change. Jonathan Nez had a $20 billion needs list. And so $2 billion is a very small percentage of what's actually needed in our community for critical capital infrastructure. And that's not even talking about pandemic relief. So, you know, I'm just so disappointed to see this again. Like, I don't actually have faith that the current leadership is going to reach a compromise and be at a point where they've spent this additional $1 billion. I think that money's still going to be there when I get to Window Rock, and I'm going to spend it within the first 60 days.
And how do you plan to spend that? Tell us your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we definitely need to continue dedicating some of it to pandemic response and, like, you know, creating that infrastructure of that fourth branch of government that's able to do that quick deployment on a disparate regional basis, right? So that's a big part of it. Hold on one sec. And then, of course, you know, the infrastructure component. Making sure there's running water and electricity in our homes, that there's broadband if our kids have to go remote again. Only 4% of our homes on Navajo Nation have wired broadband. That's ridiculous. Or at least we need to be going after making sure that there's 100% cell phone access in our community so that folks can at least access the internet through cellular service. Like my niece at my mom's house, we're like 20 miles from Winslow. She couldn't even get cell service to do remote learning at my mom's house. That's ridiculous. So all of these things, and then re-stimulating our economy, talking about, do we even want a tax for 4 years? And let's, you know, invest in our entrepreneurs instead of sending all this money to the tribal enterprises. You know, so I think, honestly, both pieces of legislation have really great ideas in them. I think what happened last time that I'm so disappointed in our leadership with is council was saying, we want to know what projects in this larger NES plan are going to impact our constituents. That's a common sense thing that council should be asking because they have to be accountable to their constituents and tell their constituents, hey, this is what our community is going to be getting, and this is why we're getting it this particular way. But that conversation never happened. You know, council has never shared that information. And it's such a basic thing, a basic matter of respect to have that level of communication with other leaders. That didn't happen. And then so there was the competing legislation, which, you know, it's like, okay. But then that was just sort of like, you know, not every chapter has the same population. Not every chapter has the same needs. So I think that's the shortfall on the other side. So yeah, basically I think we should lock them in a room, yourself included. I'm sorry.
Yes.
But you have the leadership where you could pull everyone together and say, like, let's be pragmatic, and like lives are on the line. Like we are in the beginning of another surge. We can't allow another, you know, 500 people to pass. You know, and we can't allow this virus to continue spreading, because every time it spreads, that's a risk of loss of human life in our community. And our community has been hit so incredibly hard. Like we can't keep enduring these huge waves of transmission and loss of life of our loved ones. So those are my thoughts on the legislation.
Thank you for being really honest. And that's really the purpose of Let's Talk Politics. You know, I'm not going to take anything personal unless you were to attack my husband and son, then I would say that that's personal. But really, this is our job. And you are correct. It has been a disappointment. And I know that, you know, as a council delegate, it is frustrating. It is very frustrating, you know, to hear we are constantly, we started off asking. And I can say now that we are now begging for Jonathan Naz to sit down with us and to talk to us and to, like you said, you know, to hash out these details. I would love to be locked in a room with the other delegates and President Naz and start talking about, you know, this $1 billion that's still sitting there. There's no excuse for that.
It takes time.
You're 100%. Oh my gosh. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, initially it was like there's blood on the hands of Congress for leaving our community in the situation that it's in. Like all of those, that first wave of loss of life, that was on Congress for not ensuring that our people have 21st century living conditions, and for making our homeland a national sacrifice area that led to disproportionate rates of cancer and asthma, upper respiratory illnesses, diabetes. You know, but now that we've had $2 billion, now this is like our own leadership. This is on them. There needs to be a sense of urgency. This is the most important piece of legislation that our council and our president could be addressing. And they shouldn't do anything else before they've addressed this and gotten those resources out to our people.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's the frustrating thing is, you know, people think that technically, yes, a council delegate, you know, is powerful, but when you have other delegates who don't want to meet either, you know, and, you know, it becomes an issue. And I can honestly say that I have heard on the record, I have heard Otto So, you know, ask that the president be present, you know, during these times that we are talking about this money. I have heard Edmund Yazzie make that same request. I have heard Speaker Damon on the record, you know, say, President Naz, you need to work with us. I have seen multiple emails going back and forth, you know, where we're asking him to sit down with us. And right now, the honest to God truth is that we have a president right now that is sitting in Window Rock that refuses to work with council, that refuses to listen to the people. And you are correct that there are hundreds of people who lost their lives. And it's so frustrating because for me, you know, I think housing is so important right now. Housing,
yes,
we have to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Whether it's doing a, you know, a startup home for somebody, you know, not designing this elaborate mansion for one person, but doing a startup, you know, a startup home to say, this is what we're going to start you off with. It's going to be your responsibility, you know, like put that to use. And if you want to expand your home, then that's going to be your responsibility. But I think housing is so important. Water is so important, but we run into so many issues right now where we do have people we do have people who are refusing to let the water lines through. And it costs more money to go around a grazing permit or to go around a home site lease to provide access to water and electricity and broadband for people who are just living just right on the other side of that home. So we are facing those types of issues. So I can say right now that I agree with you 100%. Miss Branch, I think that, you know, you said it here, you said it live on Let's Talk Politics, that we need to be locked in that room. The people need to lock us in that room, and a decision needs to be made right away.
Absolutely.
And it's very unfortunate that politics is being played out right now, and the lives of our Navajo people, you know, it's at stake right now. And we haven't made that decision. So right now, you know, again, we do have these two competing legislations. And then I also will be honest with you in that some of us did drop legislation to be written. I dropped my legislation. I recall I was going back into trying to figure out, was it June or was it May or June that I first dropped the hardship legislation. And it wasn't even written until December.
Yeah. I was like,
and there's so much,
December.
There's so much politics being played right now. And again, you know, for me, it's very frustrating that those types of games can be played.
Yeah.
And I've always been, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for getting things moving, like some resource. Otherwise we'd have $2 billion sitting in the bank right now. And our people like not able to pay rent or, you know, buy PPE or, you know, our people needed relief. And so I think I'm glad that you had the courage and the leadership to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. And we do have two presidential candidates that have actually on the record, both on my Facebook page and then also at the last forum, state that the hardship was welfare assistance to our Navajo people. And I find offense to that because it wasn't, you know, welfare has such a negative connotation attached to it. Like people think that welfare is such a bad thing. The hardship was not welfare for our Navajo people. The hardship was exactly what you said, for the Navajo people to be able to spend that money on things that they need. And somebody made a comment, you know, I was just now reading the feed and they said, you know, each community is different. How does the government know what I need? And that's so true. We don't know what the people need. We don't know how COVID affected, you know, homes. And as a delegate, I can say that, you know, I'm not going to pretend to sit here and say, well, I know that Joe Schmo over there really needs, you know, this. I don't know what Joe Schmo needs, you know. Everybody's needs are different. Yeah. And so thank you.
You know, it's like, yeah, some people bought new shoes or whatever that maybe they didn't need. But a lot of people put that money to good. I mean, that money was already spent. They were just catching up on their bills, trying to survive. We're dealing with this inflation, the gas price. I mean,
it is. It really is a shame.
I could use that money. So I didn't apply for it because I just felt like I want that money to be used for the public, and you know, myself and my son didn't apply. But,
well, I think it was certainly a scary time for a lot of people, and it's so easy now to be able to look back and say, well, you guys should have handled it this way or this should have been done. But I think when we were living through the reality of it, we were only responding day to day to what the needs were. And I can, you know, it's not an excuse. There's no excuse for us having that $1 billion. And I can say that I've had federal leadership reach out and say, what the heck is Navajo doing? You guys said you needed this money. We gave you that money. Now, like, there's nothing being done with it. We're watching you. And it's just really frustrating. But I agree with you. We need to be locked in a room.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you want to do is just
giving the money to the chapters sounds good, but going back to the conversation about lack of capacity at the chapter level, like, will the chapters be able to spend that money time if it goes to them? You know, so it really needs to be everybody coming together and working together. I hope to see that. I don't know that it will, but
yeah. Wow. Yeah. Certainly a lot of questions being left out there, or a lot of, answers that need to be brought out in terms of
Well,
the way that this funding should
one
be spent.
one of the things that I'd love to do with that money, if it's still there, is a big bond issue. Basically a deposit on a borrowing, saying, and leveraging that. So we're not just funding $1 billion worth of projects, we're funding like 10 billion or 5 billion, whatever the banks are willing to lend us.
Yeah.
And like coupling that with pledging our federal roads revenue, so that it's not just, housing, water, electricity, broadband, but it's also roads. And then we just go hard for 4 years, building, trying to make up as much ground as we can to put the critical capital infrastructure in place that we need. And then hopefully we can add to that with some infrastructure money from the Fed.
Yeah, and imagine how many jobs that would create. How many of our Navajo people could come home, who could actually stay within their communities and be able to go home, at the end of the day and spend time with the family, to have dinner, with the family. I mean, that's a lot of our Navajo people's, dream, is to be able to be employed at home, and, to be employed on the Navajo Nation, just and making comparable salary.
Yeah, and if you did a borrowing and you pledged all that money up front and deposited it, that's obligated money.
Yeah.
You could document a financing in 30 days, 60, 90 days easily. Well, not easily, but some lawyers somewhere would be getting lots of white hairs, but
probably a little bit easier for you. So before I go on, because that pretty much are the three questions that I wanted to ask of you, and just to be clear, the first question really kind of came from your platform, and that was really kind of talking about the land development and just kind of the changes that need to happen in terms of land with business leases, home site leases, grazing rights, all of that stuff. The second question, we did talk a little bit about chapters and just the push to overhaul chapters and where we're at right now with chapters. And then the third question was specific to ARPA. So I want to thank you at this time for being able to just be upfront. And again, this is Let's Talk Politics. This required me to have to do my homework because of, and you just never know where the conversation is going to go, but you did an excellent job. I do want to ask you, one thing that you didn't talk about in your introduction was your education. Tell us a little bit about your education. You alluded to it in a few of the questions, but I just want, just so viewers know, your education.
Yeah. So I graduated from, I'm a Loop Tiger, so I went to Loop Elementary School and actually kind of bounced around a little bit, because like our bus stop was like 6 miles away on a dirt road. And so when the roads would get really muddy during the winter, sometimes I had to live with sisters in like Winslow or Flagstaff. So I kind of bounced around in the off-reservation public schools. And then by 5th grade, actually 3rd grade, I started to really notice a difference in the level of math that was being offered in those different schools. So by the time I was in 5th grade, I'd convinced my parents that I wanted to go to off-reservation to Flagstaff for school. And so I rode the bus from the Meteor Crater exit to Flagstaff every day with my little sister. And then for high school, I ended up in Winslow and graduated from there. And then growing up on the Nation, I didn't really get to be involved with extracurriculars. Like even in Luke, my mom was like, we don't have gas money to take you to practice. I have my sheep and my cattle and horses to take care of. Like, that's also your job. You should be doing that instead of playing basketball. So I didn't really get to do any kind of extracurriculars. It was just like hard work at home on the ranch, and so I always dreamed about that. So when I went to high school, I lived with family members initially until my dad got sick enough that we had to be in town for electricity and running water and stuff to meet his medical needs. And so I just did every club, every sport I possibly could do, and just was like ridiculous president of as many things as I could be. And then that was kind of like the perfect application for Harvard. And I also knew that I wanted to be a veterinarian because I wanted to go back home and, continue our ranching operation. And it was always hard to get vets out there. And so I was preparing myself for a scientifically rigorous career. And so I did summer programs through like Upward Bound and whatnot. So anyway, so that kind of set me up for the perfect application to get admitted to Harvard College, which I didn't think, like, it's not like I had dreamt about going to Harvard my whole life. It was just like I got those applications in the mail. It was like Harvard and Yale. And I was like, seriously? Like, I can't go to a school like that. There's no way I could afford to go to school there. I was kind of defensive to get their applications. But then I was like, okay, I'll apply to one of them. And so I applied to Harvard and somehow like got in. It was the woman who interviewed me because I was rodeo queen that year and I was wearing my belt buckle at the interview. And so she did trail riding. So we talked about horses the whole time. So I'm pretty sure that is why I got into Harvard. But anyway, so I went to
so that saying that it's important what you wear to an interview really is true, right?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you know, I went to Harvard College, and it was really hard because my family didn't have a phone. I had to like write letters to them, just because we were so poor, you know, like we lived in a 1-bedroom trailer house in Winslow from high school. Anyway, so I survived in 4 years and came home, and I was a headmistress at the Southwest High School in Sabadelkai. So I was able, like, really close to home. And then did some other education work as well, but I kept encountering that issue of like families being separated because of jobs, and like my kids not having their parents involved in their lives, and that making it hard for them to be successful. So I decided, you know, I really need to go after the development challenge in Indian country, and that's why I pursued that joint master's in public policy and law degree at Harvard again, because, you know, I knew, I was like, I'm going to say some crazy things. I need the credibility of that institution behind me. Like, you know, some of this government reform, like I want us to start talking about getting the states out of our jurisdiction and rethinking our government, our intergovernmental relationship with the United States. And like start talking about like, hey, we are inherently an international sovereign. We have created an alliance with the United States that's embodied in our treaty, but we don't need you, the United States. Like, we don't need to be part of you. And maybe we shouldn't be part of you because being part of the United States creates this huge overlay of regulations that traps our people and prevents our people from having hope and prosperity, opportunity in our communities. So what would that look like if we moved away from that? So, but to be able to have those conversations, I felt like I needed to bring the name like Harvard behind me. Otherwise, people wouldn't take me seriously.
Wow. I mean, that is really amazing to hear that you are Harvard educated, that you went off and really you had humble beginnings. And like you stated at the very beginning, you didn't know, you know, like you didn't know you were going to go to college. You didn't really know that this was going to be set out for you. In my opinion, I think that that's being humble, because I think a lot of us grew up not ever believing that we could go to college or that, you know, college was even an option. And so for you to, you know, state that you'd lived on the Navajo Nation in 1-room, you know, trailer, living there, your parents were ranchers, and that you left, you went on, you got your degree from Harvard. Kudos to you, Miss Branch, for doing that. That's great to hear. And the great story about dressing for success, as somebody said, somebody already pointed out about that, you know, the importance of dressing for success. So now we're going to transition a little bit, and we're going to go to some of the questions that have been sent to me. I will say that I'm going to read this first question because this person was actually the first person to email me when I made the announcement that I was going to be doing this Let's Talk Politics. And I think it kind of falls in line with what you talked about with dressing for success. This question, I'm not going to say the first name, I will say the last name, however. And this is a question from a male. L. Gishi is the person who sent in the email, and this is what he says. Each year, our people, rodeo athletes, flock to Las Vegas to compete in Indian National Finals events. What are your thoughts on building an indoor arena for our young, intermediate, upcoming professional, junior, and senior rodeo athletes? And he also pointed out the last 3 administrations were posed this question with a promise to work on it with no plans on it after inauguration. Ms. Branch.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. Like, one thing that always comes to mind is, like, you know, Derek Begay, when he made it big, he's kind of from my area. When he's a bulldog, you know, when he made it big, then Navajo Nation came running to him, and all these politicians wanted pictures with him. And he made some comment somewhere, I don't remember where, and he was like, "Where was the Navajo Nation when I was asking for help, when I needed gas money to make it to compete in the rodeos, you know?"
Right. Yeah.
And I was just like, we really need to be investing more in our young people and, like, you know, capitalizing on their potential. We do that with basketball. You know, we have all these amazing basketball arenas, and our young people do phenomenal at that, not only in high school, but also moving on to college. But we don't have that same level of support for our rodeo athletes. And they're like national, like professional national champions.
Yeah.
And so I would be very supportive of that. And I think it also ties into capitalizing on our tourism economy and continuing to build that, you know, bringing more people from the outside to watch our rodeos, our top athletes performing, and just also investing in our young people and supporting them and pursuing their dreams and being true to who we are. You know, our people are ranchers and farmers, and we need to honor that and
Yeah.
invest in continuing them on that path, because that's so important to our future. You know, rebuilding a local food economy, and ensuring that our families have financial stability. Our families are already doing these economic activities. They're just not being really respected or invested in by our government. So I'm one of the things I really want to work on is reinvesting in agricultural infrastructure, and this could be part of that, right? Like fixing all of our irrigation canals. Those have been neglected for so long, and that opens up opportunity for more farming all across Navajo Nation. We could become the new breadbasket of America, and those are jobs, local, sustainable jobs, and that our people are already doing and love doing and want to do, but there's like just not that opportunity or investment by our government.
And all because we bring the infrastructure here to the Navajo Nation that would showcase the talent of our Navajo people. That is such a phenomenal idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for answering that question. I'm sure Al Gishi is going to enjoy hearing that. I can say that it is, with sports, we do see a lot of, sports arenas that are built, but we don't really have any outside, arena that would host rodeo events. And we do have many of our Navajo people who compete off the Navajo Nation. So just for clarification, somebody said, we don't need to be giving Las Vegas any more money. I mean, that would be one of the reasons, or one of the ways that we can avoid
to Navajo Nation, right?
Right.
Like with Res, I was at the Res conference, and it was like, I'm kind of bothered by the fact that we're in Vegas, because we could be at like the San Manuel Casino Hotel, and like bringing the money of that conference, Reservation Economic Summit, to an actual Indian nation. But so like, let's do INFR in Chinle,
Oh, wow. Can you imagine the amount of money that it would bring in if we did INFR in Chinle or Shiprock?
Right.
Shiprock.
And then
I'll repeat that again, in Shiprock.
We could also be hosting those big bull riding competitions or other competitions in that facility, and bringing more, cowboys from PRCA or whatever, PBR, into our community. That's, tourism, that's stimulating our economy, more demand for hotels. And then just one other thing is, in the face of climate change and all of the wind that we're seeing in our community this spring, this is actually necessary, like creating those indoor arenas to ensure that we are able to continue enjoying rodeo activities and participation while, the wind is blowing around.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that wind has been so hard. I know for many of us, I live on a farm, and I can't even do farm work because the wind gets so bad sometimes. I can't, I'll clean the yard only for the next day. The trash comes in, the tumbleweeds come in. So you are correct in that wind is really, stirring up a lot of, a lot of issues for a lot of people, but certainly those who are participating in rodeos. And I know that we have many of our Navajo people who are affiliated with rodeos. So thank you.
And it's not just rodeo. It's also, I'm a 4-H luminary, actually. I'm an alumni who got like some big award. But 4-H taught me financial management skills. Like track how much hay was I buying for my horse, like how much was I spending on the upkeep of my horse, and just tracking the health of my animal. And when the Gold King mine bill hit, that was one of our big challenges, is that farmers weren't really keeping records for like how much seed, how much they had produced year to year, how much they had invested in their seeds. And so when we were seeking damages, we didn't have as much records to work with as we would have liked to have had. And we dealt with that with economic modeling, so it wasn't that big a deal. But it just highlighted for me, like, we really need to help our folks who are doing agricultural economic work to help professionalize their work. And that can help set them up for federal farm loans, and, kind of like helps them level up their operation and access more resources, and then have the resources and also do planning, right? Like, okay, so in this year you generated X amount of revenue. What's your goal in 5 years? Like, how do you build up? Like, how much more seed do you need to do? How much more land do you need? So anyway, it's just across the board. And so if we had an indoor arena, that's a space that 4-H kids could be utilizing for their shows and their
flea markets.
Yes, I absolutely want to build indoor flea markets. That is essential, because otherwise the flea market's operation is totally dependent on weather. And it's also just seasonal, right? It's only during like warm times of year, but those could be operational in the winter. And that's when our people need, clothes for their kids, for school. They need Christmas, gifts. I don't celebrate Christmas, but I don't celebrate colonial holidays.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but I know lots of people do. So
yeah. Well, thank you for answering that question. Like I said, Al Gishi, thank you for that question. And because you were the first one to send in your email, I had to ask that question. So next question. This comes from an S. Platero. She said, I have a question I would like you to ask candidates for Navajo Nation president. I am from Naize, New Mexico, but I reside in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been living in Phoenix for 36 years, since I was 10 years old. My parents moved here for jobs. Today, there is no connection or support for Navajos living in the cities. For example, in Phoenix, there's no chapter house. It feels like since we live in the city, we are forgotten. And she did put in quotes, forgotten. Many people live in the city for work and school. What, if anything, will you do differently for urban Navajos? And that is from S. Platero.
Yeah. I think with the change, sorry, my cell phone charge is going down, so I'm going to have to move closer to the electrical charge point. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Oops. My background is going to be a little different.
That's okay. You're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all of the depopulation that's happening on our nation, we need to do better to keep our urban Navajos connected to the motherland, basically, and our culture and our language. So, like the language and cultural programming I was talking about, the summer programs, I think those are things that we need to be delivering, maybe in collaboration with urban Indian centers. There's some key cities. There's maybe like 6 different major urban areas where our people are located. So making sure that there are local resources available to them. There are even like a liaison for tribal government that helps people navigate the complexity of it, and eliminates the need for people to have to come to Winter Rock for every little thing, whether that's getting a CIB for your your newborn child, or like dealing with the hardship issue. Yeah, so applying for a home site lease. Hopefully it'll be, you know, a land claim, a residential land claim instead of a home site lease. And it's much easier
yeah,
to hear. So
yeah,
yeah, I think having those urban ambassadors are important, and then having specific events there that are tied to the culture to kind of keep highlighting the importance of that and making it relevant to our urban Navajos' lives, and advocating with them to come home, right?
yeah, yeah. No,
Highlighting
you
different
are,
opportunities in our community, because one of the things is, you know, our socioeconomically, our community really not very diverse, right? I think I talked about it before, like people who can qualify for NHA housing, or are like a lot of folks who are dependent on government, right? Either for services or for a job. And so we need to diversify that and bring in our innovators, our middle class, our upper middle class. And those people are out there. We have that economic diversification in our population. It's just that a lot of those people live off reservation. So what if we could bring those people home? Like, we could totally transform our nation overnight if we could give people a place to live and to operate their businesses. And then economic development really happen, because we'd be reinfusing our community with human capital, and bringing a huge range of creativity and skills to bear on the challenges that we face in our community.
Yeah. Well, as you know, housing is a huge issue. Yeah. And I think that this is a really great opportunity for me to say to you, Ms. Branch, that you were actually the one who hired me.
Yeah.
You remember that. You remember that. And I do recall at that time, you know, there was a push to bring back educated, you know, Navajos back to the Navajo Nation, you know, to help assist. And I say that, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, you know, I didn't come back here to the Navajo Nation to make money. That wasn't my motivation, because here on Navajo Nation, we do have a lot of Navajo people who are not making comparable salaries. And so my motivation to come back, So my motivation to come back was my mom. I wanted to be closer to my mom. I wanted to be here, you know, on the Navajo Nation, and really participate again in a lot of the ceremonies that we are affiliated with. So that was my motivation. You know, it was like, okay, I can take the pay cut. That's fine. You know, my motivation was my mom, ceremonies, you know, living closer to my Navajo people, but housing was a problem. It was so hard to find a home, you know, because you're not making a comparable salary. It's difficult to live off the Navajo Nation where they expect you to be making a comparable salary. And I remember when I was looking at places to rent in Farmington, I was looking at $1,200, $1,500. You know, we thought about buying a home, but because of the salary decrease that we had taken to move back, you know, buying a home wasn't an option. So it does become very, very difficult. So you bring me into the next question, which is about housing. So Yazi, as in Mickey Mouse, Yazi did send in this email, and she did send in 5 questions, but I'm going to look specifically at the question that she has pertaining to the housing issues. And what she said is, what plans do you have for housing and the help for veterans in terms of not only housing, but physical and mental health? Ms. Branch.
Yeah, it's kind of 2 questions.
Yeah.
Because housing question by itself is quite a thing. But I feel like I addressed that in the land reform conversation a good bit. But, you know, by doing that regional planning or that comprehensive plan, identifying those growth areas, and doing that comprehensive zoning, land use planning at that municipal level, so to speak, and creating those turnkey home sites, and and just like residential communities, really, then that clears the path for people to have a place to bring something or to build something, and hopefully creates that pathway home for people. But I think another part of it that does need to happen, we need an alternative to NHA. We need a competitor for them that's out there, spending money faster, motivating them to do their job better. And then we also maybe even need to start thinking about creating our own entity where it's just developing like apartment buildings or developing these planned communities, so that we can get that off the ground immediately, and try to have, build so many homes within 3 years or something like that. And the CSN fund can be utilized for housing. That's one of its major purposes. That was a $500 million fund. And I'd like to see some of that money be used for, I don't know that any of it has been used for housing. That could be the source of funding to build these residential areas, and you could recoup the money, right? You build it, you sell it to tribal members who want to come home and live there, or you rent the apartment, and you're creating a source of revenue for the government. I think that's something that we really need to go after, and there's no reason we can't do it. And then in terms of veterans, there's the Veterans Trust Fund. That was a $6 million fund initially deposited in 1998 and was made accessible in terms of the interest earnings and annual revenue applications. I think it's 4% of the annual revenues for Navajo Nation that get deposited in that, and that's available for expenditure in that current fiscal year, in addition to the interest earnings from the previous year. I don't know what that amount looks like. It might not be adequate. I mean, $6 million, but I don't think we've really been spending that for the last however many years.
Only one house has been built by the Nez Leiser administration.
I was wondering, because I was looking at all of those reports in advance of the Veterans Forum to see like how much work had been done, because that was set up like a year ago, right, to be a project, but only one house has been built. It's terrible. But that's a source of money that can be dedicated towards veteran services. And honestly, I don't think our veterans know about a lot of opportunities they have for accessing those dollars. Like there's travel funds, there's hardship funds, there's housing repair funds in there, and they could get quite a large amount. Like if they went after all of those sources of revenue on an annual basis, it's a couple $1,000s that our veterans could be accessing through the Veterans Fund every single year. So I'm actually going to do a video on that to kind of walk through what opportunities lie within that trust fund so that our veterans are aware of that. But in terms of mental health and physical health, making sure that the clinics they're talking about closing in northern New Mexico don't get closed. And then, the mental health is such a huge thing. And we have such a need for those services in our community, generally speaking. But we really need to have some kind of a reintegration program for our veterans when they come home, where, they're getting surveyed. There's an intake assessment being done about the needs that they have, whether they have a house to go to, a home to go to, and what their job plans are. And that entity needs to be connecting the veterans to those resources, making sure that those needs are being met. And the same thing with mental health, right? Particularly if someone's coming from combat duty, making sure that they're being reintegrated in the right way. If they did a ceremony to go off to war, making sure that they close that out, so that doesn't cause mental health issues for them. But that's not so much a question for veterans. I think that's a question for Navajo Nation generally. Like, we need to be making mental health services available across the board. We need to be filling. We have a lot of vacancies for those positions that are funded positions. I think that goes back to housing, like our mental health professionals, our young people who leave home to get training to be a counselor, wanting to come home and make a difference, can't do it because there's no place for them to live. Like there's no place for them to bring their family to. So we need to go aggressively after the housing to make sure that those funded positions are filled, that we have the professionals in our community that we need. Many of those will be our own people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just investing, and like let's create an institute, and like a just sort of, we have that need for the detox facility, alcohol rehab facility, and then mental health facility. Like maybe that could be like one complex, or we just do one central complex in Chinle, and then our people have access to it there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the veterans issue, certainly is an issue that's so important here with this next term. We're talking about how much money goes into the permanent trust fund, how that's divvied up, to help address housing. But what we really haven't talked about is like the mental health services that are needed for many of our veterans who are coming home. Yeah. One idea that I did put out there was transitional communities for our veterans. Do you want to show Navajo Nation your little one? Sounds like he's there.
Come here, sweetie. He's kind of busy. You want to? He's.
Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
Can you see? Can
you wave to everybody?
You say yat at? You say yat at?
I think he's ready for mommy and him time.
He's ready for a nap. He's like,
he's ready for you to be done. and it's good timing. It's perfect timing right now, because right now what I can say is we're at the end of our Let's Talk Politics. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to kind of wrap up everything that you said, and really, I'm going to say use this time to convince the Navajo people to vote for you, Miss Branch. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the time to you at this time. So Miss Branch?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I think my leadership is going to be really focused on solving problems. Like, I don't want to leave this long list behind for the next person to come in and have to face. And that's something I did as Attorney General as well. Let's just take on these challenges. Let's not keep talking about and complaining about them forever. Let's get the job done. We don't have a lot of resources or time. And so we need to just, measure twice, cut once, or whatever, and just move forward. And one of the big things I want to do is modernize, make sure everybody has modern computing devices, that our staff has training on how to operate in a 21st century government, and also just build efficiency in our government as it is now. There are lots of inefficiencies in our government. So putting together a group of folks and just saying, okay, what are those things that people complain about all the time? Let's go after those and solve those problems. Some of that's going to require law reform. I've already done some of that. Like, some of the inefficiencies in our public safety system have to do with some provisions in our rules of criminal procedure and our criminal code. I proposed those revisions, did that job when I was Attorney General, but council didn't approve it. So, just moving that forward, right? Yeah, just, doing that, and then also bringing our people into 21st century living conditions, making sure that when our veterans come home from defending democracy abroad, and protecting America and the wealth and opportunity that's in this country, that they're actually able to enjoy the fruits of democracy when they come home. And that means having housing opportunities, running water in their home, electricity, a job opportunity, a way to make a living in their homeland. So those are two really, really important pieces for me, and just reasserting our sovereignty, our inherent sovereign authority, doing real nation building. We need to ensure that we have a future 100 years from now. At this point, I'm not certain that we do. If we continue losing our population the way we have been, and as we lose our people, we lose our language and our culture. And, in the face of climate change, like, I don't know if my mom can continue living on the ranch this summer because it gets so hot and there's no electricity or running water there. And so, you know, ensuring that life doesn't have to be so hard for our people, that they don't have to put so much wear and tear on their vehicles to go get food, that they can get food within 20 miles of where they live, like good food, those sorts of things. So, yeah, I want to make our government work for the people. You know, like, let's reclaim that together. And that's what government should be doing. So let's make sure that it does. And that's going to take some revisions to the structuring of our government. That's going to take some revisions to our laws. And that should be happening. We should be writing our laws based on Navajo truth, Navajo hope, and not just copying and pasting from state statutes or federal statutes. And that's sadly what we've done for most of our laws. So it's a lot of work, but we can get a lot done in 4 years. So.
You're ready for that work.
Yeah, especially if you have a great speaker to work with.
So she's throwing these great things out, but I just have to, you know, I have to give you kudos for doing that.
Yeah.
So the last thing, Ms. Branchett, I do want to ask you, and this has been a huge controversy or a huge issue that has come up on so many levels, on so many occasions. I thought that we were past it, but it sounds like we may not be. And you know, obviously, you know, with your son being there on your lap, thank you for doing that. By the way, I think it's so important, you know, to show that women can be moms and we can have a full-time job, you know, and we can, you know, we can make change at that same time. But my question to you, and I want you to lead, you know, to finish up with this question, is women in leadership. There has been such a negative stigma attached to women in leadership. And I know that there's going to be people out there who are going to say, well, you know, she couldn't even do an interview without her son, you know, coming on. I think it's great. I think it sends such a positive message. I love that your son is on and, you know, he's making himself known because he's our future. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on Navajo women in leadership? Last question.
I think that Navajo women get things done. That's what happened during the pandemic. You know, Navajo women aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty. And if you want a job done, get a Navajo woman to do it. You know, so I mean, I ask people like, okay, so what is the actual basis and tradition and culture for this? And nobody can give a straight answer. So I'm just like, this is just Jeanette. You know, and I think that we had balanced leadership previously, and that under this colonial model, we've reached a huge imbalance. And so I think it's time for women leaders to reemerge and reassert their rightful place in government and all across the board in our community. And our women are already doing that. They've done that for a long time. A lot of really great things happening. Some of the council delegates I have the highest regard for are women delegates, you know, like getting that money to our people. It took a woman leader to do that. And women are, you know, we are thinking about our people, about our elders, our children. And we want to make sure that those resources actually get to those people. And so I think having a woman leader, you're going to have someone who's more compassionate and whose heart is more with the people and who's going to be very efficient and effective. So, yeah, I think I'm all for women leaders. My mom was a strong woman leader, you know, on the ranch. You know, my dad was a working cowboy. And so he was gone most of the time working at ranches in southern Arizona. And my mom was operating our sheep and cattle operation and managing all of the livestock. And I was hauling the water, throwing the bales of hay, you know, like I was, you know, sometimes people will ask me, like, tell me about your experience as a woman. And it's like, you know what? I just think of myself as a human being. I've had to do men's work my entire life, like so-called men's work and women's work. And I've done it all. And our first leader as Diné people was white shell woman, changing woman. And she was able to do it all. She created us, and she guided her children, mostly alone, and she created this incredible trajectory for us. And when our medicine men pray and they invoke the deities for help, they're praying to men and women deities.
Yes.
And so I think, again, it's that balance, right? There's always been that balance until this colonial government model was imposed upon us. And it was our women leaders who made sure we came home, who made sure that we are still Diné when we were prisoners of war. Without those women leaders, we'd all be in Oklahoma talking with a twang. I'm pretty sure that would have been the case. But our women said, we are not budging on this issue. And the men leaders at the time had the good sense to listen.
Yeah, no. And I've even heard stories about how when our people were with the that when that decision, that time came to start talking about whether we were going to be sent home, the men, the leaders, the chiefs consulted with their wives, on the decision. And and that's left out many times. I've heard it growing up. I've heard the story again. I've heard some of the the Navajo traditional medicine men tell that story. That you have the strong men, but you always hear the men say, behind every strong man is a stronger woman.
Yeah, I think it's a balance, right? Like we have to have both together. To make sure that we're taking care of the entire spectrum of needs in our community. And so, having a woman leader is part of that balance. And we're on that path towards restoring it with all of these incredible women running for council, all of these incredible women running for president. So, to me, it's a bright time for our people. And I'm excited to have more leaders in our government to clean house. We're going to focus on how things are here in the homeland. Make sure things are getting done, things are being repaired and functioning proper, and that the lives of our people living here are better, and that our children can come home, right? So.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that with what we're seeing right now with the number of women running for elected positions, I feel that this is that hope has been restored, that our women are no longer being told that the home is your place and that's the only place for you. I think that we're opening, this door for many of our young Navajo girls to see that this is possible, that you can go to Harvard, that you can get an education, that you can, come back and you can help your Navajo Nation. So I'm super excited. Thank you so much, Miss Branch, for your time. Thank you for, for answering the questions that I had posed, and really, developing such a great, platform that I can say 2 of my questions actually kind of just like your platform created a perfect segue into the 2 of the questions that I was able to ask. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate, what you're doing for the Navajo Nation and how you're opening those doors for many of our young women. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Because I'm here to get things done, right? I just want to focus on what's most important. And that's why your questions were, those are the issues that people care about. Like, let's get as far in meeting those needs as we can in the next 4 years. Because our people's resources are precious, our people's time is precious, my time is precious, and we don't want to waste time here. That's not what we're about. We're about solving problems, moving forward quickly, and making things better for our people.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Branch. I appreciate your time again, and good luck on the campaign trail. For those of you who are watching, the next Let's Talk Politics will be with another candidate. I believe we have Mr. Bigman, Mr. Greg Bigman, who will be on Wednesday. And the topics that we are pulling from are range from generating revenue, hemp, helium, LGBTQI, veterans, dealing with the trust fund and veterans housing, the Washington, D.C. House, public safety, scholarships, ARPA money, chapter house reform or chapter house government reform, grants that are tied to federal and state money, small businesses, education, land reform, broadband, and other services that our Navajo people deserve. This is Delegate Charles Newton reporting to all of you, and thank you all for joining me here today. I hope that you all can join me on Wednesday as we do ask similar questions and put Mr. Bigman on the hot seat. Thank you so much, Ms. Branch. Again, good luck with everything, and I look forward to seeing you out there on the campaign trail. You be safe.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Echo on that.
Okay, bye, everyone.